It isn't just about the technology. It's that marketing attribution is a strategic and commercial decision about what counts and what's important.
The big thing that everyone's talking about right now is deal velocity. Is the deal stalling? Is it because we're not right fit for the business? Is it a buyer that's stalling? Is it the buyer groups that are holding that up?
How are you demonstrating that you're contributing to revenue? Are you making us money? How much do you cost? And is it replicable? That's what they're going to ask.
Everyone wants to prove that marketing works. However, hardly anyone actually can. So joining us today is Michelle McGoff-McCann, a senior CMO, a revenue attribution expert, and a published author with a PhD, who has made it her mission to close the gap between marketing activity and commercial proof. And I can't wait to hear what she's got to say. So, hi, Michelle. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited about this conversation because I think this is a topic that is close to many marketeers' hearts, especially in the ABM land. So you've been working in attribution and a wider scope than that, I know, for a while. And I know that you recently you started really focusing in on this with a particular organisation. Should we start there? So talk us through when you first got to EG, the company that we're talking about, and you got a first look at where they were with their attribution. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. The company I was working for is called Estates Gazette. It's in real estate, focused on the UK. And it's a hybrid business, news, events, and data. But they really wanted to be a data business. So I got asked to come in and be the CMO. And within the first day or so, one of the metrics that came in of how marketing was performing was that 3% of their activity was contributing to closed-won business.
Wow.
Yes. And that was quite jarring to see. And so my first reaction was, what have I got myself into?
Things can only get better.
Yeah, exactly. And it can only go up from here.
Yeah.
And that was really exciting. And so there were a lot of activities and things that needed to be done in order to improve that number.
And did you trust that number? Did you question it?
I did question that number. And part of the reason was because it's hard to believe that only 3% of activity, you've got this team, they're working really hard. And yeah, every team when you come in needs improvement and there's things that need to change culturally and skills-wise and organizationally. But I mean, I didn't believe for a minute it could only be 3%. Yeah. And so there was a lot of work to do in order to bring it to the point at which we could then say, we've got the activity fixed, we've got the right people in place, rebranded the whole company. Okay, now we're ready to see where we go from here in terms of effective marketing attribution.
So talk us through the journey. Where did you start? Because that's always, I think, with marketing attribution, there's so much you could potentially measure. Where do you start?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. And so EG was a siloed business to start. So, and part of the complication with that is you have a subs business, and this is in a lot of hybrid businesses. So this isn't just, picking on them. It's a good example, actually, is you have the subs part with it has the news and a magazine and a digital magazine. Well, they're targeted in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then events, they had their own P&L. And then the data part of the business kind of had its own P&L. So right from there, you've got a marketing team that's stuck in the middle of a split of how you're going to approach what activity you do and what's important. So that had to get fixed first. Mm-hmm. Where are the most important places that marketing can be placed? And from there to start looking at what the touch points were. Yeah. Based on the priorities across those businesses, and have a look at that and then realize that there's a lot of disparate databases in which we need to bring together in order to make this happen.
Lots of spreadsheets.
And in short, because I could carry on for quite a bit about it, but in short, that it's complicated, and each business needs a bespoke solution. Now, I'm confident that we're going to talk about frameworks on the upcoming conversation and how important they are, but each business has their own aspects. So when somebody says, well, what would you do with a tech stack? Well, I mean, I don't feel like I need to have that exact answer because it's going to matter based on the type of business and how it's structured. So we started from there.
Yeah. So sort of laying that groundwork
Yeah.
on how they were operating as a business and where they wanted to go, like where their objectives were, because like you say, they were quite siloed. So, and I would imagine that's true against every business because especially, and we were talking on an earlier episode about the siloing even of marketing. So you've now got different people responsible for different areas and often not a CMO. So then in that scenario, attribution becomes even more critical, but even more challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why applying a methodology or an approach to each is really important. But I would take the next step in terms of really thinking of that 3% and desperately wanting to prove that wasn't necessarily true. Plus, we had fixed a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Was convincing the tech team themselves. It was a central marketing team that were going to build this dream, which I was very focused on what this dream was going to look like. The conversations were pretty basic. That these were very talented people that could build anything. It was what took a little bit of time. We got there in the end. Was that so? You want to record every touch point of where marketing's involved. Touches a prospect or even a client, of course. Yeah, but isn't that cheating? You got to have these conversations. How is that cheating? Well, yeah, you're trying to take credit for everything. I had to check my ego for a minute. Am I? No. So it took that conversation to explain that these aren't just touch points. These are intentions. And this is just only a few years back, but the term buying signals hadn't come into play yet. Let's remember.
Wasn't in the narrative. No.
We were calling buying signals. Well, we weren't, it was still evolving, but it was to show that intent. And when we finally built it, and it finally emerged, in the first 6 months of measurement, it went from 3 to 25% of that impact on close won deals, and then overall, in the next phase, it went from 3% to 72%
Wow.
of marketing influence on close won deals.
Yeah.
And so I think it was the term influenced and understanding what that meant, and then how that information could be shared appropriately to show that marketing was contributing to revenue.
Yeah.
And that complexity, you spoke earlier about the tech stack and that complexity of the tech stack that you were putting in. I guess you had a utopian, I call it a utopian vision almost. This is how it should work. This is how I'd like to see it work. But as we know, the realities beyond that have been implemented various different tech stack solutions. How difficult was that for you to get commonality across the divisions of the business? And then also as well from the extracts or exports from that tech stack give you the data that you needed to see?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, there was a little bit of opportunity in that the corporation on the whole was starting to look at its data and where it sat, particularly client data. And so I volunteered us as the guinea pig, as one of the businesses, to put ourselves forward to start looking into the information that goes into the data lake and how it gets pulled out by Tableau or Power BI, in case we did both, actually. So that was one aspect to it. Another aspect, I suppose, to try to answer your question, is that in looking at across the board of all the different places in which we could pull that information, there were also some different complexities that needed to be sorted out that were maybe hadn't been figured out in the wider corporation. So we were the guinea pig for that project.
Because those complexities back then, when you were doing that, are still the same complexities today.
They haven't changed one bit.
Everybody's still fighting. How do we find a very good level of what we call signals that give us the information to know what we're doing is right, and then ultimately what do we do next? And that's still a challenge today.
Absolutely. And I think it was just knowing what you could measure. So I mean, to answer your question, it was just knowing what was possible. So how can you prove your marketing's worth? Well, what is it that we're sending out? Where are these intersections? And let's just at least put that all on one page and say what's possible. We did it in 3 phases. It couldn't all be fixed at once.
No.
And it's knowing the levers as well, isn't it? And I think it ties back to your point that you said at the beginning around having a framework. So having a strategic framework where you can build phases, as you say, and have very clear expectations about what those phases involve, what short-term KPIs they're going to be delivering, but also what long-term value are they building towards. And I think if you have a framework like that, it makes the attribution planning and deployment a lot more straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't have focal, which of course you can speak to more than I can. But I mean, I think that's what's most important, is knowing that this is a strategic and commercial decision that you're making of what's a priority and what isn't. And it's really important to do that within the context of something that can be replicated and understood. And I know you can speak more to focal, and I certainly please do. I think that understanding what that methodology is and using that and establishing that as something in and of itself that's valuable is incredibly important.
Yeah, because it's a guideline for those that don't know focal. It's a strategic framework that we've developed, but the purpose behind developing it was to give marketeers that blueprint and to make it easier to do things like attribution. It's about lead gen and ABM as well, but it's also about attribution, because obviously, to begin with, to know what's impacting, you want to measure everything and you want to attribute everything. But what a framework gives you is that over a 12 to 18 month period, you start to learn, okay, I don't need to measure that. These are my leading indicators. These are what I know moves the needle on deals, for example, or moves the needle top of the funnel or whatever it is. And then you can streamline and hone what it is you're measuring and tracking.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly impressive. I mean, we didn't have focal. We had me and a few others trying to figure out the best way to just communicate what it is, what those results were and what we were seeing, and do it in a way that, and knowing your audience, who's your audience. Yeah. So our audience wasn't necessarily just the marketing team backslapping each other of like how many MQLs we had. And, that had to evolve. It was understanding who our audience was that we were going to be communicating this to, and that being ultimately the CFO at a group level.
Yeah.
And I guess the acceleration of attribution as well, because I think once you start to see, to your point, you see the needle starting to move, then you can start to make some really positive decisions about, and what next? What does that mean? What's that impacting in the next stage of the pipe, for instance? And how do we then measure that as a result of the activity that we're doing here?
Absolutely. And I think, just to your point, is one of the things that happens when we would get asked the question, and I don't think I've worked anywhere that you didn't get asked this question, but particularly EG, is how is marketing helping us push things through the pipeline? You're like, I'm sure, actually.
Great question.
Let me think about that. But yes, we could see that if... And this is just one scenario, but if somebody went to an event, I still, I'm on my soapbox, but it's still the case.
Hey, the podcast is called Soapbox, so it's
okay, excellent. I'm in the right
You're on our
spot.
soapbox.
But it absolutely is that if somebody goes to an event and, maybe they're not sure. They went to a few sessions. These are buying signals. Like, you have to bring that back and share that information. If you're putting out your newsletter and that same person is reading every newsletter, what are they looking at? And have they brought a product yet? I mean, just being able to evaluate that information. And then, of course, I don't have to tell you, you group it and you make it larger and larger. And you can actually start seeing some real data to make decisions that actually, at this point that we decide to give it a number, or it's at a particular point in the pipeline, that you can say, oh, I know what we can do. This is the point where we want that customer service rep to get in touch, or we want our SME to get in touch. Yeah. Now we know what to do to actually get that through.
And that's the leading indicators bit is so crucial there, isn't it? Because it helps you qualify those signals. So are they actually intent to buy?
Right.
Or are they researching, or are they, and you can put checks into your funnel or your campaign processes to really help give yourself a sense of, okay, is this real? Or is this just somebody looking around and trying to do, but they're never going to buy, and that's by that insertion of those people and roles within that.
So those metrics right now, Michelle, have never been so important, have they? Because if we look at the biggest issue, or the big issue that everyone's talking about at the moment is deal velocity, understanding the buying journey, where things are stalling, the people that are vetoing the deals. And so for organisations to be able to act on that, to say, okay, now we understand this set of metrics, we can now move in a positive way, not knowing necessarily whether the outcome is going to be positive, but your actions, are decisive to actually try and overcome that, I guess.
Yeah, I think if you don't know, you can't know what to do if you can't measure the behavior.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's where I see lots of different in lots of different aspects of different types of clients in lots of different areas of business and colleagues that I'm speaking with is, you're in real trouble if you don't know what you don't know. I mean, we all say that, but specifically to buying signals. And so when you say, you're taking it to that deal velocity, I mean, for a lot of the companies that, I speak with and different colleagues, and what's happening in the marketplace is that's really sophisticated.
Yeah.
That's really sophisticated. And I think that a lot of marketing, I'd say revenue attribution is starting. That's why we're seeing people starting to educate and self-educate and actually go seek out advice of speaking that revenue language.
Yeah.
The concept of commercial marketer, we've discussed this. I've discussed this with lots of different people. Is some people in the past have taken offense to that, like I've always been commercial, and it's like now's not the time to get the chip off your shoulder because we're in a crisis right now across the board in marketing where we all are in this situation. This isn't just you have to prove not just your worth, but your commercial value that's adding to bottom line revenue.
And that point you make exactly, and we see this coming into the conversations, RevOps, so the role of RevOps, Chief Revenue Officer, all of a sudden now they have a seat at the table more than ever than we see in that combination with sales and marketing at the same time. So everybody's understanding that commonality, that understanding of the challenge and what needs to be done.
Do you think everyone understands it, Graham?
I think they read it. I think they comprehend it. I think it comes a lot down to culture, and is the business ready to combine those cultures or bring those people together? In previous podcasts, we were talking with James from HPE. We're talking about that marketing and sales alignment, and he said absolutely you've got to bring everyone on the journey. Well, I think it's becoming broader because of that buyer group complexity and everything that sits within that, and try to understand every stage, every responsibility, and everybody has a role to play in that, what I call central pot of intelligence almost. What do we know? And then we can act on it.
Yeah, and that sounds a lot more like the science of marketing than the art. I think that we've all been tagged as artists, and I'll take that, that's fine. But, that moniker works for me. But at the same time, the science comes into it where they're more sophisticated conversations. And I guess I would just ask a question. Are you finding that some organizations are lacking that sophistication, or do you think they're trying to rise to it? I mean, this is a general question, but are they seeing that science, or are you leading
I think it will
people
depend
to
on the
it?
business and how big the business is,
Right.
and whether they have people in those roles, or specifically to your point, are you telling people what to measure, and subsequently they're saying, well, we don't have somebody in role to be able to measure that, but we need somebody who can actually do that, I guess. So I guess it's down to the maturity of the business and the needs of it. And I guess the more case studies you talk about in your business and how do we deploy, the more case studies that we execute, it will become more common knowledge as such. And people will see that formula for success, go, that's what we should be doing. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, like just how EG ended, I mean, when I kind of knew that we'd made it was more than just seeing that dashboard and being like, okay, we like it. That looks beautiful. I love it. It was a beautiful thing. But it was that the CFO, his response after understanding what it was we were trying to achieve was, I don't have to worry about marketing anymore. And I remember thinking, okay.
That's a big win.
Well, I think it is a big win for lots of different reasons, because CFOs generally look at marketing as a cost center. So we went from a cost center to a revenue accelerator, one that could be counted on and one that, was predictable.
Yeah. And it is about communicating that up as well in a way that makes sense to the business. So we were working with a client last year where we were able to show that the number of days between MAL to MQL, MQL to SAL, and then SAL to SQL, and then SQL to opportunity. Across the board, we were able to speed that up by 35%, and we were able to show that. And then you think what a difference that makes to the bottom line. If each of those stages is reducing by 35%, the overall gain on that deal velocity is huge. And you think what revenue that brings into the business, because effectively it halved the amount of time that deals were sat in the pipe. And it's things, because like you say, it's not the dashboard, it's what you do with it that matters. And it's how you then communicate that above to say this is the value of marketing. Halving the amount of time that deals sit in the pipeline. That's a commercial conversation. So attribution in private equity companies. So this is a topic, and we don't have to spend too long on this, but I think just a little bit of advice for people on where they should be focusing, because a lot of people are in companies that have been acquired by private equity. They're under a lot of pressure around attribution, and they may not have done it before. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I mean, my thing would be, if you can't measure what you're doing, I know everyone's busy. My advice would be stop doing what you're doing right now. Look into it, see what you can measure, seek advice, come up with a plan, because a private equity company is going to come in and ask you exactly how your and the board, but a private equity company is going to come in and ask, how are you demonstrating that you're contributing to revenue? Mm-hmm. Are you making us money? How much do you cost? And is it replicable? That's what they're going to ask.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, that's going to devalue. And I've had this experience. I've been asked recently to speak with someone and give them some private advice. And it was that the buyer of the company had said, well, the company didn't have an attribution model and it didn't have social media even. And they said, well, you know what? That's going to cost us money if we buy you.
Yeah.
So
it had a direct influence.
Direct impact on the cost of sale. So I would strongly recommend, and not just the marketing people, but to have that conversation at a C level about how important it is.
Michelle, look, we're going to take you straight in. It's a new concept for us in our podcast as our quickfire questions. So what we'd like to do is ask you a quickfire question.
Okay.
And we want you open and honest quickfire. I don't want you to think about it. I just want it's going to be like second nature. Okay. So let me start. What's the biggest misconception about marketing attribution in the enterprise right now?
That technology will fix it. It isn't just about the technology. It's that marketing attribution is a strategic and commercial decision about what counts and what's important. And don't get caught up in just the tech. You have to make real decisions. And you should know who you're building this for and who you're reporting to. Start with that end goal as well.
I love that. There's a great phrase that Steve Jobs talks about. I can't remember it all. And I used to give a keynote on this, and it started with technology is not enough. It's the liberal arts matched with the humanities that create things that truly make our hearts sing. There you go. It was in there.
I like it.
but yeah, that's something he said. Right, next one. What's been the biggest impact over the last 5 years on attribution?
The biggest impact on marketing attribution is marketing used to be able to just report to justify their existence, is just to show people what they were doing. I think the biggest thing now is you have to show that you're driving commercial value, and you have to do it in such a way that it's understood, or you will have the private equity company or whatever your exit plan is, and everyone's got one, be very important to demonstrate exactly what it is that you do that drives long-term revenue.
Yeah, no, good answer. And the final question, what's the biggest gap or challenge?
The gap, I would say that the gap is that's happening right now is between what marketing teams are able to prove and what they need to prove. It's a different way of answering the last question, but it's the same one. That gap is what you can actually show that you can do, and where you really need to be. That's the gap that I see.
Fantastic. Michelle, you've been great. Thank you so much today. Our listeners or who's watching this can't feel the energy in here, but it's been a great session. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. I think we'll probably have you back on again, actually, because there's so much to talk about on this subject. But until the next time, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Lovely to see you.